This is Davide Marocco. Thank you for being here. We are organizing these events from the University of Naples, and there are several people here that are involved in inclusion, different aspects of inclusion in the higher education sector. So first of all, I thank everyone to being here, especially also the Padiglione Italia that given us the possibility to share with you this work that we are doing. And the day is organized, the morning mainly, is organized in a kind of informal way, as we would like to share with you some ideas. We will have an invited speaker, Professor Ilaria Boncori. She is already connected here from the University of Essex. Ilaria is a professor of the University of Essex, and she will say something about her and her work, a very inspirational work on inclusion related mainly to the university sector in this case. And then we would like to discuss with some ideas, different dimensions, different aspects related to inclusion and how to boost the aspects of inclusion within the educational sector mainly. And also we would like to share between the morning and maybe the afternoon a little bit some of our work in the context of technology that we have done in relation to fostering multiculturalism, inclusion skills, and also soft skills in general. And we will share some software that we developed, software and also physical games, let's say, that help people to get in touch and to boost. The title is actually Innovative Tools, so try to innovate and using new ideas, new technologies to really work on these fundamental dimensions. Okay, so I give now the floor to Annalisa, so she will say something about her, and then to Professor Ilaria Boncori that will give us her view on inclusion in the higher education sectors and inclusion in general.
Thank you. Welcome everyone. I'm Annalisa Amodeo and I'm an associate professor of clinical psychologist, and I'm a coordinator of anti-discrimination and culture of differences of Center Synapsi. Synapsi is a center of University of Naples Federico II that promotes inclusion and activity participation of students, all students, but in particular students with disabilities, underachievers, and students at risk of victiming of ethnic and gender and sexual stigma. In these years, we are developing a project co-founding European Commission. The Xenia project, we are in Xenia project developing an innovative higher education inclusiveness index to map and evaluate how higher education institutions are inclusive, scoring them against a set of objective indicators. For us, the inclusion is the participation, the collaboration between all components of our system to create a safety a beautiful institution. I'm here, but I'm not alone because with me they are my students that want to create a video, and I want to share this video. Please.
Angststörung? Komm, reiß dich zusammen, du bist bloß sensibel.
لا نريد أشخاصا مثلك هنا.
عزیزم ببخشید، من و مامانت از پس از اینها بر نمیایم و تو نمیتونی بری دانشگاه.
Grabes, ascensor, lipame, δεν υπάρχουν.
Las mujeres deben de saber de química, porque las van a usar para poder limpiar los daños de sus narices.
Sei troppo vecchio per stare all'università.
전공이 너한테 잘 안 맞으니까 전공을 바꾸는 게 좋을 거야.
Depresión. Nada de eso. Está todo en tu cabeza. Muévete y estudia.
Go back to where you came from.
اخلعي هذا الحجاب، أنت ليس في بيتك.
Let's stop this together.
Good morning. I cannot hear Davide, but I see you pointing at me, so I'm hoping that you are telling me to go ahead. Thank you. Okay, can you hear me okay? Great. So my name is Ilaria Boncori. I'm a professor of management and marketing at the University of Essex in the UK. First of all, I would like to say thank you to colleagues for inviting me to speak today about inclusivity in higher education. The University of Essex and the University of Naples Federico II Synapsi Center signed a friendship agreement a few years ago. And when I visited the center, I was greatly inspired by the amazing work they do in terms of anti-discrimination, inclusion, and just fostering enabling environments. So thank you so much. I'm not sure whether colleagues are able to share my presentation. Thank you. So today I will be discussing with you how we at the University of Essex have been fostering an inclusive environment in higher education. Next, please. Or may I go next? Yes, I think I can go. Thank you. So I wanted to give you a little overview of the content of our presentation today. So this is going to be a very practical, applied presentation. So my own research is on inclusivity in organizations and lots of different types of organization and lots of different ways that people are marginalized, oppressed, or discriminated against. But today, rather than talking about my own research, I wanted to share with you some very practical, concrete ways in which my university has been working on enabling environments. So this presentation is very much based on my experience at the University of Essex. I moved to Essex. So I'm originally from Italy, and I went from Italy to China, where I lived for about 5 years, and then to the University of Essex in 2007 in the UK. So in this session, I will focus on 4 macro areas of academic activity, which is strategic approach, teaching and learning, student support, and staff development. I will not be looking into research today just because of time constraints, but I'm really happy to liaise with colleagues later on research matters. I wanted to start with a couple of slides on premises. So the first premise is that we try to put students at the center of everything we do. So student-centeredness is absolutely fundamental to us at the University of Essex, because we aim to provide a transformational experience for all students, regardless of their background, their identity markers, their previous experiences. So we believe that university and education can really be transformational in people's experience, and that has definitely my own experience as a student and as an educator. In order to do this, we also need to provide staff with enabling environments where they feel supported and enabled to create those conditions that will allow students to achieve their best potential. In order to do this, then inclusion, equity, and diversity need to be embedded across all levels of university experience in order to make sure that everyone in our community can feel included. So this also means that difference is respected and valued, not just accommodated or tolerated. And also that inclusion does not mean assimilation. And what I mean is that very often we think of inclusion in abstract terms, but actually inclusion is lived at the individual level, at the collective and organizational level, and at the systemic level. And sometimes organizations, universities, or bigger structures feel that by including people, they just allow people within their system. But if the system is not inclusive per se, if the system is set up to discriminate against some groups or some individuals, then that is no longer inclusion. It's just assimilation into a system that is not catered to serve all of their members. So another issue that needs to be recognized is that there is privilege. We all have privilege. We all have different types of privilege along different continuum, and those need to be acknowledged and sort of valued as well in order to create an inclusive environment. We also need to ensure accountability and involvement within EDI, equality, equity, diversity, inclusion at all levels of an organization. Something that is really important is also to foster co-construction and partnership between academic staff, professional services staff or administrative staff, students, and the Students' Union. So we believe that in order to make a difference, all these different members of our internal and external communities have to come together and work together to achieve the best. Excuse me, I have a terrible cold. So these five key aims, I think, are important to consider as we move along throughout the talk. So the first thing is about celebrating, supporting, and respecting personal characteristics and creating comfortable and respectful environments to learn. So this is really about acknowledging people's characteristics and the fact that these characteristics are also intersectional. So I am a woman, a mother, a professor, I am white, and there are a lot of identity markers and characteristics that make me who I am. And all these come together to inform my experience and how I support others. Working closely with students and staff who have specific needs or certain conditions to enable them to engage in learning and student life. So sometimes within a large organization or a large university, individuals can feel a little bit lost or alienated, but it is important that everyone and every need is looked into and accommodated or supported. Encouraging students and staff to reflect and challenge their own unconscious bias, knowledge, and prejudices. This goes back to understanding and acknowledging privilege, bias, and prejudice, which sometimes is cultural, sometimes is contextual or individual. Making individual adjustments for students and staff to recognize the multidirectional aspects of identity, physical and mental well-being. So the Romans used to say that you need a healthy body and a healthy mind, because this is in recognition that every aspect of your physical life, intellectual life, emotional life comes together. And we have to acknowledge that staff and students in higher education have these different aspects of their living and being that need to be taken into account. And then finally, tackling inequality to enable students and staff to feel valued and achieve their best potential. So it's not just enough to recognize inequality. We need to tackle it and to fight it in order to foster equity. So the first of our kind of macro areas of today is a strategic approach. And I decided to start here because a few years ago, I found myself in a great meeting of an inclusivity network of universities in the UK. And that's where I realized that not all organizations have a strong commitment from the leadership team in terms of equity, diversity, and inclusion. And I felt very lucky to have an organization that fosters that approach. So I thought it would be really important to start by considering something that is perhaps a little bit obvious, but that the fact that equity, diversity, and inclusion have to be at the heart of all strategies and approaches, not just as a side strategy or an ad hoc process, but something that is truly part of who we are, what we do, and the direction we want to take in the future. So also it's important to think about equity rather than equality. So equality is about treating everyone the same, which is already a good start, but is not quite enough because people don't all start from the same advantage point or the same level of privilege or the same conditions or context. So equity is recognizing these differences and making sure that people are treated in a way that allows them to achieve their best potential. So, for example, we have key strategies that are at the university level in terms of staff, people, and human resources, our internal, external communities, education, and research. And inclusion is part of all of these. Something else that I think is really important is that the very top level of the university is visibly committed to inclusion. So we have visible examples of statements and projects that our colleagues have taken on. The University Steering Group is the very top level of leadership of our university, and each person in that steering group is a champion for a characteristic of diversity and equality. And so these people are responsible for an action plan. They, for example, are the gender champion or the race champion or the sexual orientation champion or another characteristic. And staff and students can get in touch with them to discuss concerns or new projects or any activity around those characteristics. And so there is a direct access in terms of inclusion and protected characteristics and non-protected characteristics that we think are important to work on for the strategic level of our university. And so this explicit commitment at the top level is also visible in our policies and procedures, but also in our marketing and in our images. We are very lucky to have 3 campuses in the UK, one in Colchester, which is a campus university with a lot of grounds, a beautiful park and lakes. And if you walk around campus, you will see lots of examples of inspiring people who embody this diversity. We also have a campus at Loughton and one at Southend, and they also promote inclusivity in lots of different ways. Excuse me. Sometimes I've realized that diversity and inclusion work can become sort of a project or something that a member of staff does or something that becomes an activity that colleagues do on a volunteering basis. But in order for change to happen and for enabling environments to be truly put in place, the university needs to invest in inclusion. So this can be in terms of investment in staff or facilities or resources or funding, but there needs to be a strong commitment at the strategic level. In terms of investment, for example, we have developed a training portfolio. Some of this training is in person and some is online. Obviously, when the COVID pandemic hit us, we moved all our training online to make sure that none of this was being stopped because of the pandemic. Some of the training is mandatory and some of the training is elective. So there is a program that staff and students can access. For example, we have training on unconscious bias, on compassionate teaching, equality, diversity, and inclusion, mental health basic training for personal tutors, and so on. And some of this training is led by University of Essex staff, and some of this training is done by external consultants or other organizations that are part of our network. We also have staff-led networks and groups at the University of Essex that are around specific categories of inclusion, and these are managed, led, organized by staff. So, for example, we have the LGBTQI network, the disability network, the parents network, and these can be operational or social or more academic-oriented networks. But it's a way for staff to come together, consider issues, and share good practice. We also have over 100 clubs and societies through the Students' Union. We work in very, very close partnership with colleagues at the Students' Union. And it is important for students, whether they're UK, EU, or international students, to find different homes at the university within and outside of the classroom. So one thing that strategically is really important and we've worked on over the past few years to improve is an integrated approach to inclusivity that goes from the broader university level down to the departmental level and the module level through teachers and support to students, so that all levels of activity are permeated by this work on inclusivity. Something that is also really important to us is looking at strategic alliances and partnerships. As I mentioned before, a few years ago, I visited the University of Naples with a colleague from the inclusivity team, Karen Bush, at the University of Essex. We exchanged good practice, and it's important that we learn from each other across borders, across cultures and contexts. So, for example, at the moment, the university is part of UFE and YERUM, which are European networks of universities that share, for example, various work streams on inclusivity. And we're leading on the inclusivity work stream with the University of Bremen. We also are part of the Eastern Arc partnership in England, where, for example, we've developed a mentoring program for staff. And if a particular need of a staff member is not satisfied within their own university, they can take advantage of mentoring across universities. And then we also work with external organizations, for example, Citizens UK, to work on particular issues or particular themes that we want to develop. Excuse me. Something else that is important in terms of a strategic approach to inclusivity is to look at our policies and procedures. So a few years ago, we found that especially the student-facing policies and procedures tended to have a very formal language, which sometimes was difficult to process for students and even for staff at some point. So we've made our language more inclusive in policies and procedures. We've streamlined our policies and procedures to make them more accessible. And also to make the language more inclusive. So, for example, in terms of pronouns or titles, or language that is more inclusive of all of our members. We have worked on our recruitment, promotion, and probation processes, which are criteria-based, to make sure that they're as objective as possible, and decisions are made at different levels and different stages in groups. We have also looked at the language of the website in our job ads, for example, and we've been doing a lot of work over recent years around the gender pay gap. Something that we have heavily invested on is an evidence database approach to education. So we have developed a great team of planning and data insight colleagues who look at the very macro level, but also the micro level of experience in our students. So at module level, course level, and departmental level. And so, for example, we look at differential outcomes. So how students who come from different backgrounds, or in terms of race and ethnicity, gender, disability, how they are doing across these groups in terms of good degrees or student satisfaction. And it is important that we understand the lived reality of our students, and that our actions are purposeful and targeted, so we can really make a difference. Our second macro category is around teaching and learning. And as I said, I won't go into research, but there is a lot of great practice that goes on at the University of Essex in terms of inclusivity in research. Recently, my colleagues from Essex Business School, Professor Martina Sliva and Professor Melissa Tyler, in connection with the British Academy of Management, have, for example, produced guidelines on inclusive events and how to make our events more inclusive, which cuts across education, marketing, and teaching and learning. During the pandemic, I'm sure this was similar for many organizations, many universities around the globe. We've had to review our policies and procedures, and we embarked in a huge review of our policies and procedures at the undergraduate, postgraduate, and postgraduate research level, in order to make sure that the policies and procedures were still fit for purpose, but also because the pandemic has highlighted differences in privilege, differences in discrimination and access. And so we have very consciously looked at lessons learned from these past 2 years of teaching and learning, and we've integrated, modified the rules of assessment to accommodate this, and we have been reviewing and continue to review teaching modes in terms of blended learning, remote delivery, in-person teaching, noting that different groups of students are affected in a different way across these modes of teaching and learning. We've also done a lot of work in terms of assessment, and this work will be also the focus of some of our teaching and learning for this year. So we've been looking into assessment design and how to make our assessment more inclusive. So this is in terms of formative or summative assessment, so assessment that is aimed at providing feedback and support for the development of the student, or assessment that is formally marked and it is contributing towards their degree. Scaffolding, so looking at providing an incremental development of students' skills, knowledge, and abilities in order to allow them to have this step-by-step growth across their studies. Looking at the type and number of assessment in each module, but not just at the modular level. Very often as teachers, we are very aware of our own modules, but we don't have a sense of how the assessment and skills development in our module is mapped across other modules and courses and broader competencies developed by students in their studies. And then we're also looking at a balance of online and in-person assessment, noting that over the past 2 years, for example, take-home exam have been very beneficial for certain groups of students, like, for example, carers or workers, and also students with mental health issues. So this is something that we've learned, and we now want to integrate with our own business as usual practice. We at the University of Essex have a yearly review cycle of modules and courses. So usually at the beginning of March, colleagues like me who work in a faculty, deans, will work with departments up until March to share good practice and implement changes in modules, assessment, curriculum, and then we approve the new changes ready for the new year. Something that we also do quite regularly within departments is a needs assessment for both students and staff to look at their individual circumstances. And then, for example, students can request a special syllabus if needed, or additional support, which could be additional time for their assessment, or a scribe, or specific equipment, or other adjustments. Something that we've also learned over the past couple of years is that there can be very different approaches to extenuating circumstances. So extenuating circumstances is basically a procedure whereby when a student is encountering difficulties or challenges or circumstances that are beyond their own control, they can apply for basically a mitigating mitigation over their work. So this is sometimes an extension or something that is looked at the exam board, whereby students' work can be zero weighted or they can be given another attempt. This work, importantly, is not decided. This decision is not made by one person, it's not made by the module leader, it's not made by the professor, but it's made by a committee to ensure fairness. Excuse me. And the same procedure is adopted across the university. So we're looking also at how inadvertently discriminating or indirectly discriminating policies can be, for example, in requiring certain types of evidence or or benchmarking certain types of behavior or timelines. Excuse me. We have been working on new policies and procedures that are easier to navigate and to understand. So, following from some work I've conducted on parenting in academia and early pregnancy endings, the university has been drafting a policy around infertility, miscarriage, and stillbirth to better support students and staff going through these experiences. Excuse me. Over the past 10 years, we've also developed a lot of guidelines and supporting documentation. So, for example, we have some teaching and learning toolkits for staff. And this is mostly for teaching staff, but also for other colleagues. So, for instance, we have the internationalization toolkit to make our teaching and learning focus on the world and aware of different context and cultural and social contexts. We also have the LGBT inclusion toolkit and the race and ethnicity toolkit that we hope will help staff in making their own teaching and learning more inclusive. We also work with external funders and grants in order to support our activity around inclusion. So I led on a project in 2019, I believe, with Advance HE, which is one of our the largest higher education focused professional bodies in the UK, looking at race and ethnicity inclusion. We have also been recently successful in securing grant funding from the OFS on transitions and transformations, the Black Research Journey, recognizing that one of the groups in our environment that tends to be more discriminated against systemically is UK domiciled Black students who have a very leaky pipeline towards their doctoral achievements. And so this particular grant is going to support the development of a framework and the implementation of very concrete actions to support Black researchers. In order to be truly inclusive, it is fundamental to work together and to welcome feedback, 360 level feedback. And feedback can be both formal and informal through committees, but also through informal chats in the classroom or, between colleagues. We have feedback that is collected through teachers, but also through personal tutors. So at the University of Essex, every undergraduate student has a personal tutor, which is sort of like an academic advisor that is not really there to support the student in terms of subject knowledge, but more about in a pastoral way to check that they are okay, to help them with skills development and signposting of support when needed. We also have peer-assisted learning mentors who are students helping students. And we also have feedback that is given kind of in a plenary way, an individual way, at the module level, course level, and university level. Skills development in order to foster inclusion is also absolutely paramount. Very often we take for granted that students will have a certain level of skill, whether it's academic skills or personal development skills or employability skills or language skills. We have students from all over the world, I believe over 135 countries. So they come from very different backgrounds and experiences, and even students in the UK come from very different backgrounds and experiences. So we have skills development programs that are delivered both centrally at the university, but also through department-led activities. We also have kind of personal development skills, such as confidence and resilience. We have pre-arrival courses, and there's a new program that's been developed at the University of Essex to support students before they come to us, and then also afterwards as they go into the world of employment. And we have a specific series for postgraduate students and early career researchers called Newcomers to support our research and study skills at that level. We also feel that it's really important to work with the Students' Union to understand the student experience, and we want to make sure that we respond to feedback in a timely manner. So sometimes feedback is collected at the end of the year, and that is a missed opportunity, obviously. So the University Students' Union has been running some pulse surveys. So they're like quick surveys to kind of like check on the students, how they're doing, how they're feeling. And this has allowed us to understand more of their experience during COVID times, but also upon return to face-to-face or blended learning education, and how this experience had really affected them in terms of mental health and well-being. And so we are putting in place more support and additional measures to cater for these needs. Finally, in terms of teaching and learning, we wanted to bring together staff and students, their voices, their experiences, and I led on an inclusivity series of edited volume published by Editoriale Scientifica in Italy, Naples actually, and the .org series. So we wanted to create a little series, and you can see here there is the cover of the second book in the series, Race, Ethnicity, and Inclusion, where we have short chapters written in a very conversational language, which could be approached by high school students, parents, university students, and teachers. And these are experiences that can be focused on academic research, teaching and learning, or personal experiences to give a voice to our communities. We are also working on how we teach and how we can be more inclusive, not just in what we teach, but how we teach. And so, for example, some of my colleagues are working on compassionate teaching and humanistic approaches to teaching and learning. We have, excuse me, we have worked on a diversification of our portfolio of modules and courses. So, for example, I'm currently a faculty dean in the arts and humanities. So I have responsibility for undergraduate education over 7 departments. One of my departments is the School of Philosophy and Art History, which is hosting the Interdisciplinary Study Center. And they have just launched this BA in social change, where students will have access to a range of modules across departments, across faculties at the university, to really get deeper insights into social change and the aspects of inclusion or lack thereof that they're most passionate about. Students can also really get up close and personal with inclusion and related topics through capstones. Capstones are our undergraduate dissertation modules, and the students can investigate various topics. And one of these modules, for example, is being really innovatively designed to work with Citizens UK, which is a UK-wide organization looking at community action and issues around misogyny or refugees or living wage. And so very, very prominent issues for our society. We're also very mindful that sometimes departments and groups work in isolation. So we're trying to share work around inclusion across departments, across disciplines, across areas of expertise through seminars and groups. So, for example, we have intimate citizenship, gender and work, and migration studies, and these are shared across the university. Our next macro category is around student and staff support. Students' well-being and inclusivity services are an amazing team that the university has developed over the recent, I would say, the past 5 years or so, and they provide assessment in learning difficulties, disability, and they offer individual support to students, to staff, or departmental drop-ins. We have a well-being support line that's in operation 24/7 that students can take advantage of. We also offer counseling through like short-term counseling through an external provider, but also online cognitive behavioral therapy. We also work with external organizations such as the Royal College of Psychiatrists and the University Mental Health Charter to make sure that we're not just looking inwards and benchmarking ourselves internally, but also externally and with industry. So at the departmental level, we have a lot of student support. All academics have academic office hours to support students, and this can be in person or online, individually or on a group basis. As I mentioned, there is personal tutor support. Many departments have an open door policy where staff have literally their doors open so that students don't feel intimidated in approaching academics. We have in each department a member of staff, the DDLO, who is looking after students with disabilities or learning difficulties. And then we have inclusivity leads in every department who are members of staff, bridging the departmental and the strategic level of inclusivity across the university. We're also very mindful that learning doesn't just happen in the classroom, and sports and other activities that happen outside of our classrooms are equally important for students and their well-being. So, for example, we organize free wellness walks and refreshments, and there is a substance misuse drop-in session in partnership with an external provider. Recognizing that many students might have financial concerns, we set up hardship funds, scholarships, bursaries for students, and allowances. So, for example, during the pandemic, the university invested in buying laptops that students could borrow to do their work. And there is also mentoring as well as advice that is both general and COVID specific through the university and through the Students' Union advice. In terms of staff development, as we said, we need staff to inhabit enabling environments in order to provide a great experience for our students. So we've been doing a lot of work on pedagogy, looking at how we teach and what we teach. We have the Essex Education Strategic Fund that supports projects, innovation in teaching and learning, and very often in inclusion from staff to pilot studies or work with students on specific projects. One of our teams at the university is called Organizational Development, and colleagues in that team are fantastic at supporting teaching and learning, sharing good practice, for example, through the Essex Education conferences internally. They offer mentoring and coaching to staff. The Peer Exchange Network is a network where colleagues just share their experience and expertise with others across the university, across faculties and departments, to work together on issues or new solutions. And we've also recently created the researcher and educator development frameworks to support staff from early careers to more experienced academic staff to develop their knowledge, skills, and confidence in teaching and learning. As I said, we work well with partners all over the world, and we have recently started working on mobility across partners so that staff can visit other universities and share good practice and learn from others as well. As many of you will know, we are part of some external charters and some external ways of checking on our practice. So, for example, Athena Swan, looking at gender, the Race Equality Charter, Stonewall, gender and sexual orientation. We also work with the higher education academy to look at fellowship and professional development for our staff. We realize that it's really important to share good practice within departments and faculties and more broadly across the universities. So, for example, in my faculty, we share good practice in many ways through faculty steering group meetings where the faculty team meets with all the heads of department in the faculty. We also have a brilliant basic series where, for example, we have we look at different topics during the year. We looked at decolonizing the curriculum. We looked at inclusivity. We looked at grant funding and professional development, promotion, and many other issues that are identified through departments and through the faculties to support staff. And we also share good practice at the Faculty Education Committee, which brings together heads of departments or school, directors of education, the Students' Union, and other colleagues from professional services once a term. For example, this time, recently we looked at sharing good practice in terms of teaching via Zoom and how to engage students both online and offline at the same time in a more interactive way. We also have termly directors of education network meetings, and these are meetings where every director of education in every department across the university meets with the deans and the PVC education, so the Pro-Vice Chancellor education, and other colleagues from central teams to discuss important topics, but also agree on developments and new directions, and very often how to make our teaching and learning more inclusive. We also have worked, as many other universities have had to do, at high speed on technology enhanced learning, and our colleagues in the TEL team have provided a lot of support and a lot of training on programs and platforms and ways of teaching that are either blended or online to facilitate learning. So just a couple more slides. This is something that is just to bear in mind, is that the co-production of curriculum and other activities with students is really crucial to ensure inclusion. And so we have active student representation at all key committees of the universities at all levels, from departmental level committees, module level representation, Senate program boards, very large task and finish groups. So students are really an integral part of our decision-making processes. And they very often are instrumental in how we develop modules and how we rethink our teaching and learning. Finally, another small set of key points is looking at a holistic and integrated approach. So looking at the importance of transitions for students before, during, and after the university, considering staff background in how we support staff in terms of the cultural context, personal traits, language, and so on. Consider intersectional approaches to student and staff needs, as we mentioned before, and consider the impact of learning, physical and social environments, not only on the learning itself, but on mental health, well-being for staff and students at all key stages of their experience. So I hope this has given you a quick overview of some of the many initiatives and activities that we have been engaging with at the University of Essex that aim at fostering inclusivity in higher education. And please get in touch with me. This is my email, and that's my Twitter account. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Thank you, Ilaria. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Do I need to switch this on? Yes. Okay. So thank you very much for this interesting presentation. I think there were really lots of points. I spent several years in the UK, so I can really see many of the things that are actually not well practiced, unfortunately, in Italy, for example. So there is a very different approach, I think, everywhere. I don't know if there is any questions for Ilaria. I have one actually, but I don't know if someone wants to say something. Okay, I'll say mine, and then in case. That's actually related throughout all your presentation, but at the end, you were really the last, the first point of the last slides, basically, was something related to what I was thinking. So that you talked about the students, and the before the university, during the university, and after, right? So I was wondering if there is any research or something about how a student that has experienced this environment, right, of inclusion, of openness, how this will affect his attitude or her attitude when she goes in the work, in the working area, right? Because I think, like, for example, for people that will go to teach or this may be extremely important, but I like to understand, maybe I'd like to try to be more clear. So I think, this is extremely important, but there are people that maybe feel that they need some support, and maybe people that they don't feel that they need some support, right? So, but nevertheless, they have this support, right? Because the system supports, right? So I was thinking for those people mainly, right? They think, okay, I don't need anything in particular, like in Italy, right? For example, there are people that feel that they need, but people that are fine in a situation which nothing is provided almost. Right? So for those people, right, how living and experiencing this, inclusive situation can really be transformative.
Thank you. Yes, you meant from a student perspective rather than a staff perspective, yes. So I think we really appreciated that students come from different backgrounds, but also they will have had very different experiences, for example, in high school. And some of those experiences are positive, but other experience very much less so. So we see, for example, the personal tutoring system as something that is key in unlocking this potential. And sometimes students think, I will only need to look to meet the personal tutor if I have a problem. But actually, it's very important from the very beginning to establish a rapport with the personal tutor, looking at, you might not have specific needs, but you might not be aware that there are all these different types of support to unlock your potential and to help you thrive in a way that maybe you haven't been allowed to do so before. There is also, for example, work done by one of our departments, Department of Government at the University of Essex, which is then being adopted in other departments and adapted, looking at first-generation students. So we realized that some students don't have the social or educational background that will allow them to thrive from the very start in university. And very often, large organizations like a university take for granted some sort of baseline knowledge or understanding of how the university works or what things mean. And these students who have not had that experience before, have not had an conducive environment to understand that experience before, then are disadvantaged. So this department put in place a set of actions and seminars and initiatives and training and support to help students. And this has really made a difference, for example, in their confidence, and how they approach their studies, or even how they approach staff. So I remember that I was really quite intimidated at the idea of going knocking on a super professor's door as a student. And so we're really trying to break down those barriers. And I think it's important to look at it from different perspectives, whether it's, for example, disclosing a disability, which in some contexts and in some cultures, disclosing a disability can be something that carries a stigma or something that's negative. And actually we want to say that that is absolutely normal part of your studies, and it does not carry a stigma. You just receive more support and to help you thrive. So I think there is a lot of work on listening to students, acknowledging where they come from and the barriers that they may have had before, which are definitely impacting on the experience at university and then later on in the work life. So it's really important to address this.
From Carmen, yes, please.
Hi, I'm Carmen Ferrara from University of Napoli Federico II and the Xenia Project. Thank you for your lecture. It was super interesting. I would ask you something regarding the mentoring program. We also do have a mentoring program in our university. In the beginning, it was just for female researchers, and then we choose to open this program. I would ask you if this program has a target group, and if there are some output of your mentoring program at University of Essex. Thank you.
Thank you, Carmen. We actually have quite a few mentoring programs. So it kind of depends on what you need mentoring on. So there is mentoring for new staff, and this is for all staff and early career researchers in terms of specific research development. The mentoring that goes on through organizational development, that is to look at people's strengths and lacuna in terms of teaching and learning, training, and what they might need. It doesn't look at specific groups, but it looks at specific areas of development. And then there is, for example, the other mentoring that I mentioned that is across universities through the Eastern Arc. So I am a mentor in that program. And so people are able to select characteristics of the mentor they would like to have. So I know that a colleague asked for a woman with a young family in a leadership position, and that's how she chose me, because she felt that I could help her disentangle some issues that were to do with these three areas. So there are definitely specific groups and specific areas that can support colleagues, but there are also more kind of broader developmental mentoring programs.
Thank you very much. Is there any other? I have another curiosity, if I can ask. Sorry. That comes from my own experience. Is related to my first question and your answer. So the fact that you were talking about the personal tutorship, right? And I agree that it's very important. Although I think I'd like to know your opinion. So how important is the person that do the personal tutorship? Because I've seen, very deep. So I was at the University of Plymouth, and there were 120 newcomers, and then you have like 20, without really looking at the person that was, the staff that was, and that sometimes was a problem, right? Was an issue, because. So I'd like to know your opinion in that.
It's a very pertinent point, and I think the answer is that the person in the personal tutor is hugely important. And I think one thing that's important is that we've allowed departments to choose the model they want to pursue as personal tutor. So some departments are large departments with, say, 100 members of staff. Some departments are quite small with, say, 12 members of staff. And so some departments allocate a personal tutor to most of their academic staff, but many don't. So for some department, this is a role that the person chooses or is allocated. And I think considerations around the personal traits and skills of the personal tutor is definitely something to take into consideration, because it's fundamental in developing that rapport with the student. And for example, in some departments, like in mine, when I was still teaching and a personal tutor, I would not tutor my students. So I am a professional manager in marketing, but I would tutor students in computer science and electronics. So there wasn't that kind of like teacher-student dynamic and kind of power dynamic there. And it was a more supportive, advisory, pastoral relationship, and it was developed throughout the year. And we, for example, some personal tutors at the very beginning meet students in groups to avoid that initial sense of intimacy between two people with a power dynamic that you've never met before, and to foster communication and community building, and then meet one-to-one to support the student individually. So we've given departments lots of freedom in how they want to approach this, to make sure that they are the ones who know the students and their staff, and they can make the best decisions around this.
So it should be done sensibly, right? So in a way that makes sense. That's the point all the time, right? So you may tick the box and say, okay, we do personal tutoring, but of course, it's also a managerial aspect that should be understood probably by the managers first of all. So thank you very much. I don't know if there is any other question, or otherwise we can just thank Ilaria for her very interesting presentation. It's also very interesting for us to know what is done in other countries, and the UK on this I know is very advanced. I mean, at least for the the experience that I have personally. Okay.
Thank you so much for having me. It's really been a pleasure and a privilege to be with you today.
Thank you. Thank you. Thank you very much. Okay.
With the microphone or not? I don't know. Okay. But I was trying to get a sense, and actually the presentation from Professor Boncori was really rich, actually too rich in a sense. So I was really trying to extract the key takeaways, which is okay, that's even better. Okay, well then, yeah, it's just a wrapping up. So I was going through the mind map of what Boncori was actually mentioning. There is a lot, and it was a very rich presentation. But rather than me wrapping up the link with the streaming, probably it's one of you, no? Well, then, while we're wrapping up the video link, then we'll just thank everybody for joining us virtually, and then we'll continue in physical face-to-face interaction with the thematic workshops and roundtables with the practitioners. So goodbye, everybody, on the online and cyber world.